Mobile Suit Gundam is the quintessential mecha franchise that's been running continuously for almost 40 years now. Mainly, it's comprised of a large number of storylines that come together to form the Universal Century timeline, and surrounding that are various other series that take place in alternate universes with vastly different technology. It's a franchise that's grown to be incredibly popular and well-renowned for its pedigree. Even when it's tackling a new or weird concept, you can still rest assured that it'll feature impeccable animation and art design. It isn't always a hit, but you can respect that it still tries to take risks despite how popular it is. Then when it does hit, it really hits it out of the park, and that's why people are still watching even today. I've always wanted to dig much deeper into the series since I've only ever seen bits and pieces over the years. I'm gonna start watching it from the very beginning, moving through in release order, and I thought it would be a good opportunity to document my progress in video form. I encourage all of you to watch the series alongside me, even join my Discord server to discuss it with myself and others. These are gonna be more casual, thoughts-on type videos, not a full-on review series. I just want to chill out and talk about giant robots with you guys. So to start off with, let's talk about Mobile Suit Gundam 0079. Originally this series was just called Mobile Suit Gundam, but since it sprouted such an expansive franchise, it's more commonly referred to as 0079 for the year it was made, which also corresponds to when it takes place in the series timeline. In this world, once everyone started moving into space, they decided to reset the clock and start back from zero. I always really liked this aspect of the series because they didn't need to come up with some random year for this all to take place in, like year 3000 or something. It could take place anytime it realistically needs to, but all that actually matters to the story is that it's been 79 years since humanity started to colonize space. The Earth Federation began to build space colonies called sides and migrating most of Earth's population there in order to alleviate overpopulation and the famine it was causing. Eventually, a lot of these colonies began to grow bitter, believing they were unfairly thrown away by the rich elites that got to stay and live comfortably on Earth. They began to organize and revolt, uniting as the Principality of Zeon under the Zabi family dictatorship. They declare their independence and wage war on the Earth Federation, aiming to seize control of everything for themselves. This begins a huge year-long conflict that we enter right in the middle of. The series follows a 15-year-old boy named Amuro who has grown up on Side 7. He's a bit of a dick, but when the station is attacked by Zeon, he seizes the opportunity to save the people around him by taking control of a newly developed mobile suit called the RX-782 Gundam, which the Earth Federation hopes to turn the war around with. He escapes Side 7 with the Gundam on another newly developed piece of tech called the White Base. Due to how many soldiers died in the attack, the end result is an unfortunate situation where the civilians of Side 7 are forced to take up military roles in order to survive. Now, Amuro is forced to continue piloting the Gundam since he's the only one with experience. Before we go any further, I have to mention that I really didn't realize Zone of the Enders lifted so much from the original Gundam. The story for that game is almost exactly the same, except that the main mecha had an AI that spoke to the main character. Credit where credit is due, Zone of the Enders owes a lot of its premise to this series, and it's pretty ironic that the same studio that makes Gundam, Sunrise, also did Zone of the Enders OVA, anime, and HD collection opening. Before I started watching the show, I was of course already familiar with its opening. It's a classic, but it definitely gave me the wrong impression of what the show was actually like. I basically went into it expecting a toy commercial that eventually evolved into a serious war series. But no, from the beginning, Gundam has a pretty damn mature storyline that deals with some heavy topics. Not always in the best way, mind you, but still, they were trying since the beginning. This is the story of a child being drafted into the military to go fight and die for a cause they might not even agree with. Amuro is only a kid, yet he's sent out to kill other people who are just doing their jobs. These elements are definitely acknowledged in the story and play a big role in Amuro's character arc. It does a great job of presenting everyone involved in the conflict as human. You can empathize with both sides even though there are some legitimately bad people involved. They go out of their way to give names to even random members of the Zeon side, even when they die just moments later. Hearing their teammates crying out their names as they violently explode really makes it clear that Amuro is the villain in their eyes. Everyone acts like the whole apprehensive pilot who doesn't want to get in the robot thing is something Evangelion brought to the table to deconstruct giant robot shows. Not to discredit what that series brought to the table, but even in 1979's original Mobile Suit Gundam, Amuro goes through a lot of emotional trauma from being forced into combat. And this kid is actually killing other humans, not big monsters. He doesn't want to get in the robot either until he's slapped into submission. Yeah, there's a lot of slapping in this show. Someone needs convincing, just slap them in the face, because we're all gonna die unless they get it together. There's this one part in the show where a character named Mirai meets back up with her fiancé who she's been separated from for a long time. She thinks he's too cowardly because he tried to avoid the war, even though he clearly cares about her. Then this guy Slegger Law, who she's only known for a few days tops, comes in and pimp slaps him for being too rowdy, and then pimp slaps her for not appreciating him. Then she ends up falling in love with him because that was so badass. This was all so bizarre to watch, especially after the fiancé kind of proves himself courageous by escorting the white base out of neutral territory as protection. There were a lot of little moments like this in the show where I wasn't sure what message they were trying to convey. The show is really long and there's a lot that happens, so it's kinda hard to condense all of my thoughts into one video, but the characters were definitely the main draw from start to finish. Each one of them felt like they had a specific personality and reason for doing what they were doing. The White Base's ad hoc Captain Bright, as well as Amuro's main rival, Char, both stand out as strong characters from beginning to end. At the same time, the show too often falls into the trappings of a villain of the weak structure. I really only cared about the conflict between the White Base and the main antagonists on the Zeon side. But to fill up space between those battles, they introduced so many new characters with unique machines, only for them to die shortly after. There were so many times that they said, "There's no way they'll be able to beat this guy," only for them to indeed beat that guy, to everyone's shock. I think that if they tried to throw a few less villains into the story, but develop them more overall, it would have worked better to maintain a more realistic tone and atmosphere. Also, these kids had a cool moment at the end, but were overall extremely annoying. As for the fights, I thought they were handled pretty well for the most part. The Gundam itself is a fun machine to watch do battle since it has a wide array of weapons. I think it's pretty funny that it uses a cartoony bazooka and giant flail, but its laser swords and head-mounted guns are legitimately cool. All of its functions are used appropriately and make sense for each situation. There were a lot of large-scale battles that got kinda confusing to follow, but the one-on-one stuff was really good. Anything with Char was a highlight since that's where Amuro was being tested the most. Since the show takes the characters all over the world, you get to see the Gundam do battle in many different settings, against enemies in mobile suits designed around those environments. Watching Amuro adapt and overcome these different conditions managed to keep things interesting, even when he was only fighting regular Zeon soldiers. Then there's the whole concept of new types, which I felt came out of nowhere. I know this is a huge element of the universe, but the way they handled revealing it felt extremely rushed. You're watching this show about a kid develop his skills and come to terms with the world around him, and then in like the final third chunk of the series, they reveal he's actually what's called a new type. This means that he has enhanced psychic abilities due to growing up in space, which allows him to predict what's going to happen before it even happens. Then like half of the cast is revealed to have been new types the entire time but never mentioned it? Look, maybe I just missed this being foreshadowed early on, but it felt like it was introduced way too late to be naturally worked into the storyline, and it changed so much. Near the end, Amuro can move so fast that not even the Gundam can keep up. It just feels like we went from a natural skill progression that coincided with Amuro growing as a character, to an artificial skill boost that turned him into an unstoppable force, only challenged by Char. I still thought it was a cool concept that resulted in some trippy imagery, but they could have incorporated it better, because it kind of felt like they were just making it up as they went along. Bringing it back to the opening, I expected it to look a lot worse than it did based on that. Nowadays you see an opening and you need to scale back your expectations because they throw all of their money at making that look way better than the actual show. This was like the opposite, but maybe that's just because it had no backgrounds. Even then, the show definitely wears its budget on its sleeve. You'll be able to recognize a lot of reused animations over the course of the show. It makes sense that the Gundam would have to do a certain thing before being able to fight, but watching it so many times kinda makes you feel like you're wasting your time. The music might be an even worse offender of this though. The soundtrack basically has one track for every general emotion it wants to convey. So anytime there's a sad moment, you'll hear one track, and anytime an intense fight is happening, you'll hear another. I am not the kind of guy who picks up on background music like this, but man did it pull me out of the experience sometimes. Instead of pulling me in, it had me thinking I'd been here before and we're doing this again. I definitely think they could have condensed the show's events into half as many episodes. Of course it all depends on the series, but I tend to prefer shows that are 12 to 24 episodes. I think things would have felt a lot more concise at that length, and some of the weaker episodes could have been left out. I know that the series was later re-released as 3 compilation movies, so maybe that's the version I'm looking for. but I wanted to watch the series in its original form to experience it the way it was originally intended. I heard that those changed some stuff in the story, so I'll need to check them out because I'm not sure which version is considered canonical by the sequels. To sum things up, I enjoyed my time with the original Gundam. It wasn't without its problems, but I have to say it holds up pretty well. Like I said, I thought it was gonna be a kid's show made to sell toys, but it pulled through as a legitimately good show with some really dark elements, memorable designs, and great characters. I suggest you all take the time to experience a piece of history like this. I'm excited to get to the next series, Zeta Gundam 2, and I'll make another video on my impressions of that once I finish it. I hope this inspires you to start the series from the beginning too.